It's time for the Engaged Club, the podcast for club managers and operators that strive to create loyal and connected members, guests, and customers. Here are the two guys with the club management and digital marketing advice you need to realize your club's potential. Jim Hope and Roger Kincaid.
Welcome to another episode of the Engaged Club. I'm Roger Kincaid. I do the marketing, the sales stuff at Off Course Golf, and you can find us online at offcourse.golf.
I'm Jim Hope, and I'm the GM of the Derrick Golf and Winter Club. Mr. Kincaid, what are you going to talk to us about today?
You know, Jim, I'm really excited about this podcast. I always am, but this one's going to be fun because the topic of this podcast episode is don't let your club be a Bond villain.
Roger, I like that. I was hoping it was going to be a Bond girl, you know, and we could talk a little pussy galore and stuff and who the Bond girls were through the history of the Bond movies. But apparently that's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to be don't be a Bond villain.
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast altogether. But you know, you like James Bond movies like I do, and the funniest thing about every James Bond movie is that in every single one of the films, there's a moment where James Bond is dead to rights. You know, he's strapped to the table and the laser beam's going to cut him in half, or he's right there in the scope of the Bond villain's rifle, or like he's just always dead to rights, and he always gets away. And it wouldn't be a good movie or franchise if he didn't always get away. But the reason he does always get away, the reason he never gets killed, is because the villain never pulls the trigger.
Why do you think that is? Why wouldn't he just, finish him off and, end the movie in 45 minutes instead of letting it go for, another hour? Why wouldn't he do that?
Why not just end it with Sean Connery and Dr. No, and we won't have these decades of great films.
Is it similar to the Wile E. Coyote could never quite get, the Roadrunner is the same thing, just never finished him off?
Well, at least the Wile E. Coyote, he was trying things, wasn't he? He was experimenting. He was racking up frequent flyer points at the Acme company was what he was doing.
I liked what he did. He was the original Amazon, wasn't it? Wasn't the Acme company the original Amazon?
So I like Wile E. Coyote because he was trying stuff. He was experimenting. So going back to the James Bond analogy, though, is that you've got to pull the trigger. Like, you're right, Jim. In every single one of those movies, it could have ended in like 45 minutes had the Bond villain just pulled the trigger. So here's a story about this. This happened to me in the last couple of weeks here. One of our newest clients at Off Course Golf had a great conversation with him over the phone. He's the general manager of a private club, and at the end of the phone call, he's asked a bunch of great questions. He's really got a lot of good insight now into what the app technology can do for his members and can do for his club. And, and he's armed now with the information that he needs to know that this is a decision that's going to fit well with his club. And he says to me, he goes, "Roger, I like it. I'm 97% there." And I said, "Well, what's the other 3%? And he hems and haws a little bit. And I said, "Look, how about we do this? You've asked the questions, you've got the information, and you're telling me that you're 97% there. You like the app. You know that your members are going to like the app and that your club's going to be able to use the app. Why don't I just send you the agreement? We'll sign off on this and we'll get on to the next step, which is using the technology to really delight and serve your members." And so he said, "Yeah." And we sent off the agreement. We got all the paperwork done. And now we're on to the next step, which is, customizing this app, building it out. And his members are going to have it on their phones in the coming weeks here. But I was really, really proud of him because in that moment where he knew what he wanted, he just decided I'm going to pull the trigger. I'm not going to keep this sitting on the corner of my desk for a couple of weeks, trying to convince myself or have somebody walk in here and convince me that it's a bad idea. He knew that he wanted it. He saw how his members could benefit from it, and he pulled the trigger.
We're all a little afraid to make a mistake, right? And be criticized for that mistake that we might make. And, you're going to announce something new at your club as a GM, and some member is going to come along and say, "What's this, you're doing? Why are we doing this? We don't need this. So whose idea was it to do this?" But if true to your word, if you know that it's the right thing to do, and you know that there's a segment of your membership that want it or need it, just pull the trigger and do it. Because at the end of the day, 2 weeks after you do it, everyone's going to forget that you did it, in a sense that, forget that you made the decision, other than they're going to enjoy the benefit of it after it's installed at the club.
Right. And you always hear the complaints, and you don't as frequently hear the compliments, right? So the people that are mad at you for making the decision, boy, they'll tell you about it. But if you're hearing, if you got 100 members at your club and 10 of them are angry, well, great. 90 of them are probably pretty happy.
Well, yeah. And the proof's in the pudding, right? Because all of a sudden, I know when we installed the app at our club, all of a sudden we saw the number of downloads and the number of people that were using the app. And that was the proof right there that we had made the right decision.
So don't let your club be a Bond villain. And, if you're faced with a decision and you feel that, that deciding in one way or another can benefit your members, and it's not going to be like a seismic shift in your budget or something like that, right? I'm not advising you to tear down the clubhouse and put up a new one. Go ahead, pull the trigger. But I am saying that if you get the opportunity to make a small decision and you believe it could help your members, help your club, then don't be a Bond villain. If it's worth pulling the trigger, pull the trigger now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Raj. And the other thing it does too is it clears it off your desk as well. And it clears it out of your mind because it's always back there, right? You're always thinking about it. Should I do it? Should I do it? Why shouldn't I? Why should I? And then the minute you do it, it just clears your mind to be able to get on to something else.
Perfect. Well, that's all I've got for this episode, Jim.
Thanks, Roger. That was awesome. I like the Bond villain. I like that. Can we do a pod on the Bond girls? Can we do one on that?
Well, yeah, I think we'll just start a whole different podcast and we'll talk about that stuff.
All right. That sounds like a plan. Thanks, Roger.
Perfect. Thanks so much. You bet. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Engaged Club. If you liked it, please share it with your friends inside and outside the club business. And we would love to hear your feedback as well. You can send emails to hello@engagedclub.com. And that goes to both myself and to Jim. Until next time, thanks for listening.
This has been the Engaged Club podcast with Jim Hope and Roger Kincaid. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. If you like what you heard, share it with your fellow club managers and operators. Until next time, thanks for listening.